The sun had barely crested over the rolling hills when the peace of the ranch shattered. A low rumble broke through the morning stillness. Engines, radios, boots. Through his kitchen window, David Langford watched as 3 patrol cars rolled through the front gate, dust curling behind them. Their flashing lights cut across the golden light of dawn, scattering over the fields, over the old red barn his father had built 50 years ago. For a man who'd lived most of his life in silence and structure, David's pulse didn't spike easily. But that morning, it did. He stepped out onto the porch, calm but steady, wearing his faded blue shirt and jeans. The morning air was cool, the kind that carries both peace and tension. Peace from the land, tension from what's coming down the road. "Mr. Langford?" A young officer called out, hand resting near his holster. "We've had a complaint from the Homeowners Association. Says you're violating property codes, ignoring citations, and refusing entry." David's brow furrowed. He leaned on the porch rail, voice low and composed. "Officer, this is a ranch. 27 acres of private land. I don't have an HOA. Another officer looked at the papers, then at him. "Ma'am named Patricia Thornfield signed these." HOA president. David almost smiled. That cold, bitter kind of smile that says you've got no idea what you're walking into. He knew Patricia. Everyone in the county did. She was the kind of woman who treated rules like scripture, as long as she was the one writing them. The officer glanced back at his partner, uneasy. "You saying this isn't under their jurisdiction?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," David replied. "But you go ahead and take a look for yourself." He gestured toward the edge of his land, where a rusted fence post marked the official boundary line. Beyond that line lay the neat uniform houses of Thornfield's HOA empire, the community she ruled like a queen behind manicured lawns and threats of fines. Here, on David's side of the fence, was something older, freer, real. The lead officer took one more look at the so-called paperwork, then exhaled. "We'll confirm the property line, sir. If this checks out, they've got no claim here." As they walked back toward their cruisers, David turned his gaze to the horizon, watching the light climb higher. He knew Patricia wouldn't stop here. She'd embarrassed herself by sending police where they had no authority, and people like her didn't take embarrassment well. From the distance, through the dust, he could already see her silver SUV slowing near the gate, clipboard in hand, lips tight, eyes sharp, and for the first time in years, David felt that old army instinct stirring. The battle wasn't on a field this time, and it was at his fence line. The silver SUV stopped in a swirl of gravel and dust, its chrome grille glinting like a sneer in the morning light. Out stepped Patricia Thornfield, immaculate as ever, striped shirt tucked perfectly into designer jeans, clipboard clutched like a badge of authority. She walked toward the porch with sharp, confident strides, heels clicking against the old wooden boards as if they didn't belong on that kind of land. "Mr. Langford," she said crisply, barely disguising her irritation. "I hope this little misunderstanding won't need to repeat itself." David folded his arms, saying nothing. Patricia glanced at the retreating police cars, her voice dripping with condescension. "You see, these officers are quite busy, and frankly, it's a waste of their time to deal with non-compliant residents." He let out a quiet chuckle, the kind that makes someone like Patricia pause. "Non-compliant?" he said slowly. "Ma'am, I'm not your resident. This ranch isn't, and never has been, a part of your HOA." Her expression stiffened. "That's not what my records show." "Well," he replied, stepping closer, "maybe your records are wrong. Or maybe you're looking for control where you don't have any." Patricia's jaw tightened. She flipped a page on her clipboard. "You've been fined for property violations, unapproved fencing, livestock, and an unauthorized structure near the creek." David raised an eyebrow. "You mean the barn my father built in 1972? "That's irrelevant," she snapped. "You're expected to pay $2,400 in fines before the end of the month, or legal action will follow." He stared at her, calm but unflinching. "And what law gives you the right to fine someone outside your association?" For a second she faltered. Her eyes darted toward the boundary line, then back to her clipboard. "Don't test me, Mr. Langford. We've handled people like you before." David's tone dropped lower. "No, ma'am, you haven't." Something in his voice made her hesitate. It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry. It was the tone of someone who had once given orders that mattered. Orders that changed outcomes, She turned sharply on her heel, forcing composure. "We'll see about that," she said, climbing back into her SUV. The tires spat gravel as she sped away down the long dirt road. David stood there for a long while, the wind whistling through the fence posts. He wasn't angry, not yet. He was calculating, watching, waiting. Inside his house, he walked to the study, pulled open a drawer, and laid a folder on the table. Army Corps of Engineers, property survey maps. If Patricia wanted a fight, she'd chosen the wrong battlefield. He traced a calloused finger over the thick black line marking his land's boundary, whispering to himself, "You're playing a game of paperwork, Patricia." "But I built the maps you're trying to use." Outside, a gust of wind slammed the porch screen door shut like the start of a storm, and David knew this wasn't over. Not even close. By the end of the week, the ranch was quiet again, at least on the surface. But in the small HOA community down the hill, something was stirring. David parked his truck outside the Maplewood Community Hall, a beige building that looked more like a converted garage than a center of justice. He'd received an invitation, though it read more like a summons, to attend the next HOA board meeting. He had no obligation to go. His land wasn't under their control, but he wanted to see her, Patricia Thornfield, on her turf. As he walked toward the door, his boots crunched on the gravel, drawing glances from a few residents standing outside. Whispers followed. "That's him. The ranch guy. Thornfield's problem." Inside, fluorescent lights hummed. A folding table sat at the front with 5 board members all dressed in polite discomfort. Patricia sat at the center, posture perfect, eyes sharp. The clipboard was there, of course, resting like a sword in its sheath. She smiled thinly as he entered. "Mr. Langford, how nice of you to join us. Please have a seat." He nodded politely, taking a chair at the back. The room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and tension. Patricia began. "As you all know, we've had some issues with property compliance near the western boundary." Her gaze cut toward David. "Certain individuals believe they are exempt from community standards." A murmur spread through the room. David leaned back, calm as ever. "That's because I am exempt," he said plainly. "My ranch is outside your HOA map. Always has been." Patricia's smile didn't falter, but her knuckles whitened on the clipboard. "That's debatable," she said sweetly. "Our expansion plan from last year included your parcel in our prospective annexation." "You were notified." David tilted his head. "Prospective. Not legal. You can't annex private agricultural land without consent or county approval, both of which you don't have." A few board members shifted uncomfortably. One man, balding and mild, cleared his throat. "Ms. Thornfield, I thought the annexation proposal was still pending with the county clerk." Her glare silenced him, but David caught it. That tiny flicker of doubt among her own people. He stood slowly. "I came here to make something clear," he said, voice steady but firm. "You send your fines, your threats, even the police. But this ranch, my family's ranch, doesn't answer to your clipboard." Patricia rose to her feet, voice tight. "If you're going to play this game, Mr. Langford, understand something. I always win." He looked her straight in the eye. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I've seen real battles. And trust me, the people who say they always win usually don't." For a moment, the room was silent, just the faint hum of the lights above. Then Patricia snapped her clipboard shut. Meeting adjourned. David turned to leave, but as he reached the door, he heard her hiss behind him. "You don't belong here, David. People like you ruin order. And I'll make sure you regret staying." He paused, glanced back over his shoulder, and smiled faintly. "I'm not going anywhere." That night, the wind howled across the fields. David sat by the fire, watching the flames dance against the old family photographs hanging on the wall. His father's voice echoed in memory. "The land isn't just dirt, son. It's your word, your legacy." David opened his laptop and began typing. Not a complaint. Not a threat. A report. Detailed. Technical. Airtight. He gathered land records, survey maps, satellite imagery. Everything he needed to expose the HOA's illegal boundary claim. Some battles are fought with guns, others with documents and proof. By midnight, he had a 22-page dossier, enough to shut down her expansion plan permanently. He named the file, HOA Fraud P. Thornfield Report PDF. As he hit save, thunder cracked in the distance, and rain began to fall across the ranch. Outside, lightning flashed against the HOA boundary sign Patricia had illegally placed days earlier. The wind tore it loose. By morning, it would lie face down in the mud. By dawn, the rain had stopped, but something else had started. A small white envelope was taped to David's gate, fluttering in the morning breeze. It wasn't hard to guess who sent it. The HOA seal was stamped in bold, and beneath it the familiar handwriting, Patricia Thornfield. He tore it open. Inside was a final notice of compliance failure. All outstanding fines must be paid within 72 hours. Non-compliance will result in property lien and legal seizure. David read it twice, then smiled. That quiet, dangerous kind of smile that means someone's miscalculated. He took a photo of the letter and forwarded it to the county records office, attaching his land survey maps and the annexation ruling that explicitly excluded his property. Within minutes, a reply pinged back. Your property is not under any HOA jurisdiction. Their actions may constitute fraudulent harassment. He leaned back in his chair, sipping his coffee. Exactly what I thought. That afternoon, the rumble of tires echoed again across the gravel road. A dark SUV rolled to a stop at the gate, Patricia this time not alone. Two uniformed officers stepped out with her, though their posture was cautious, not confrontational. Patricia adjusted her striped shirt, her hair still perfect despite the wind. She marched up to the gate, clipboard clutched like a sword. Mr. Langford, she called out sharply. You are obstructing official enforcement of community law. David stepped out from his porch, calm, composed, but his eyes sharp as glass. Community law, he repeated slowly. On land that isn't in your community? Her lips pressed tight. We have documentation that, he raised a hand. Documentation you forged, or at least conveniently edited. He held up his phone. Would you like me to forward this to the county attorney? They confirmed you're outside your authority. One of the officers turned to Patricia. Ma'am, if this property isn't listed in your HOA boundaries, you can't enforce. She cut him off. I know what I can enforce. This man is dangerous. He's threatened the board. He's... Careful, David interrupted softly. You're walking into defamation territory. The other officer stepped forward, quiet but firm. Ma'am, unless you have a court order, we can't support further action here. I suggest you leave. Patricia's face flushed crimson. Her grip on the clipboard trembled. This isn't over, she hissed, spinning on her heel. The SUV doors slammed shut, and in a cloud of dust, she was gone again, leaving the officers exchanging awkward glances before driving off themselves. David watched until the road cleared, then turned toward his porch, muttering to himself, Oh, it's over. You just don't know it yet. That evening, the sky was painted in hues of copper and gray. David sat at his desk, printing the final pages of his HOA fraud report. The printer hummed steadily, spitting out page after page of evidence, emails, maps, signatures, dates. Every piece perfectly aligned. He slipped the pages into a binder, labeled it, and placed it beside a sealed envelope marked for the county commissioner's office. But as he worked, headlights flared across his window. He froze. Outside, Patricia's SUV idled near the gate, engine rumbling low. She wasn't alone this time. Someone was in the passenger seat. A man older wearing a dark suit, probably her lawyer. David didn't move. He watched from the shadows as Patricia stepped out and walked to the fence. She didn't yell this time. She just stared at his house. Cold, calculating, almost unreadable. Then, without a word, she pinned another envelope to the post and drove away. He waited until her taillights vanished before stepping outside. The air smelled like wet earth and smoke. The night was quiet, too quiet. He pulled the envelope off the post and opened it. Inside was a single line, handwritten in neat script. You think this is about land. It's not, and beneath it, a photo, taken from the edge of his property, showing him working near his barn unaware. For the first time, David felt a flicker of something deeper than irritation, violation. He looked toward the tree line, scanning the shadows, but saw nothing. Only the slow creak of the windmill turning in the distance. He exhaled, steadying himself. All right, Patricia, he murmured. You've made it personal. He walked back inside, locked the door, and sat down at his desk again. If Patricia wanted a war, she'd get one. But this wouldn't be fought with anger. It would be fought with truth. And truth had a paper trail. He opened his laptop, typed a new email to the local news outlet. and attached his entire report. Subject: illegal HOA activity and misuse of law enforcement. You'll want to read this, he clicked send. The rain began again, soft but steady, tapping against the window, like a clock counting down to something big. And by morning, half the town would know Patricia Thornfield's name. The next morning the storm had passed, but the air was heavy, that thick, charged stillness before everything changes. David stood on his porch, sipping black coffee, listening to the slow hum of the wind through the fields. He knew something was coming. He just didn't know how soon. By 9 a.m., he got his answer. A black sedan pulled up to the ranch gate. Not the usual police cruiser, not Patricia's SUV. County seal on the door. 2 men stepped out, deputy clerk and county zoning officer. David met them halfway, his boots crunching over the gravel. "Morning, gentlemen," he said calmly. The zoning officer, a kind-eyed man named Henderson, nodded. "Mr. Langford, we received a rather concerning report. Multiple, in fact. Some about alleged violations on your land, others about harassment from the Maplewood HOA. David nodded. "Both are true, but only one's legal." He handed over a binder, the one labeled Shaw Fraud P. Thornfield Report. Henderson flipped through it, his eyebrows rising with every page. "You compiled all this yourself?" David shrugged. "Old Army habit. Paperwork wins wars," the deputy smirked. "You're not wrong, sir." They thanked him and promised to investigate immediately. As they drove off, David turned his gaze toward the ridge, toward the HOA development below. Even from this distance, he could see Patricia's white SUV parked outside the community hall. Like a vulture waiting for the storm to pass. But this time she was the one being hunted. The local news van arrived first, bright blue, with the station's logo printed across the side. Then came another car, then another. Within an hour, the quiet gravel road looked like a press conference. David hadn't called them all. He'd only sent one email. But the story, HOA president under investigation for fraudulent enforcement and police misuse, had spread faster than wildfire in dry brush. He stayed calm, polite, giving the same line to every camera pointed his way. "I'm not here to fight anyone. I'm here to protect what's mine. And no one, not even an HOA president, gets to rewrite the map to steal what generations before me built." By afternoon, the county commissioner's office released an official statement confirming the investigation, and more damningly, that Patricia Thornfield had falsified boundary records to extend her HOA jurisdiction by 3 acres. Those 3 acres? David's land. The news hit Maplewood like a thunderclap. Residents flooded the community chat group demanding answers. Some board members resigned on the spot, and for the first time, Patricia Thornfield stopped talking. At sunset, as golden light spilled across the fields, Patricia came one last time. No SUV convoy, no clipboard army, just her walking up the dirt road alone. David was by the barn stacking firewood. When he saw her, he didn't move. He let her approach step by step until she stood a few feet away, her hair windblown, her eyes hollow. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, she said quietly, "You humiliated me." David didn't look up. "No, Patricia. You did that to yourself." She swallowed, her voice shaking slightly. "You don't understand. Control keeps people safe. Without it, everything falls apart." He set down the wood and turned to face her. "There's a difference between keeping people safe and keeping them scared." Her jaw trembled. "I just wanted order. And I just wanted peace," he said softly. "But peace isn't silence, Patricia. It's respect." She stared at him for a long while, the fire in her eyes dimmed, replaced by something that almost looked like regret. Almost. "Finally," she said, "they're removing me from the board." He nodded once. "It's the right call." Her gaze drifted over the fields, the land she'd tried to claim now glowing under the orange sky. "You're not like the others," she said. "You don't scare easy." He smiled faintly. "That's because I've already seen worse than your clipboard." For the first time, Patricia gave a small, genuine laugh, tired, defeated. Then she turned, walked back to her car, and drove away down the long dirt road, her taillights fading into dusk. Weeks later, the county officially nullified the HOA's expansion. Patricia was barred from leadership and a new board issued a public apology. No more notices. No more envelopes. No more flashing lights at dawn. David rebuilt his front gate and stronger, cleaner, and hung a simple wooden sign carved by hand. Langford Ranch, private land since 1952. On quiet mornings, he still thought about that first day, the flashing lights, the officers, the humiliation Patricia had tried to bring, but mostly he thought about what it taught him. Some people build walls to control, others build fences to protect. And sometimes the only way to win a war is to remind the world who owns the ground they're standing on. He took one last look at the sun dipping behind the ridge, smiled to himself and whispered, "The land remembers the truth." The wind rolled across the fields, carrying the sound of freedom, quiet, strong, and finally undisturbed.